Wow, it's been a week, hasn't it? It's been a crazy US election. If you ask any Canadian, they'll give you 1 out of 3 answers. First answer, which is going to be the most popular, which it will be not shocked. I'm not shocked. Okay, they're not shocked. A lot of Canadians have been watching the US and its US political system, the US sisters. That's what we like to say. For many years, they're seeing the trends, the highs and the lows, and we're going to talk about why Canadians are not surprised as to what happened this week. The second option is they're devastated. They're also mourning with about half of the country, and they can't believe the U.S. elected a president that did all these things and all these crimes and is a racist, a bigot, said some things that are Islamophobic, that had some xenophobia, a fascist, nationalist, that said some anti-Semitic things, and all of these things, and been charged. All of these things that has happened, they more like Canadians are shocked. Because here's the thing too, Canadians is quite liberal in their thinking, but they have a very conservative personality. Not a lot of people know that. So like a key issue in the U.S. Presidential election, the pro-choice and pro-life and reproductive rights, the majority of Canadians are all for reproductive rights. I think it's like about 60%. So even if we elected somebody that was pro-choice, pro-life, let's say, they would not, have laws that would further restrict people who want to protect women who want to protect their bodies, and people who wanted to make actions for themselves when it comes to reproductive rights and all of that, because it would be highly unpopular. So we're a very liberal country, but our personality is quite conservative. So a lot of you who are thinking of coming to Canada to live in Canada because, we say Canadians and US, people say all the time, Canada is just a sister to US. It's actually completely different. The Canadian collective, we're more of a collective. We're not individualistic. So in my personal opinion, as a person who is a Canadian but has 99% of the members, 99% of their family members who live in the US, or all their family are people who live in the US, we don't really highlight individualistic, views and, points of view and personality. We're kind of like a collective. What benefits all is what we tend to do. But there are pros and cons to that, just how the U.S. is more into individualistic, and people tend to be more themselves and to have their own personalities. And while here in Canada, it's not like that, and that's why a lot of U.S. family members that I know that travel from the U.S. to Canada for holidays and for visits, they say all the time that Canada is quite boring and they would never live here long term or permanently, so they travel back. So that's the second reason. And a lot of us are mourning, especially some of us who have family members in the US. The third reason, Trumpers, which we do have Trumpers. We have people who align with Trump's values and policies and thinking. And those people are definitely the minority. They're not a lot of them. Or we have closeted Trumpers, who are probably coming out of hiding and thinking that this is the right time to do so. So those would be the three. Obviously, the first two reasons, like I said, would be the ones you'll hear more often. You don't really hear a lot of Trumpers. However, there is a rise in nationalism and fascism, even here in Canada as well. We saw a lot of it during COVID. People did not want to get vaccines, and people thought that infringe with their rights and things like that. And again, like, our rights is a bit more collect. They're not, we do have individual rights, obviously, but we kind of do things for the whole, what benefits the majority of society. So we're going to go into the election. We're going to go as to why the world is not really quite surprised as to what has happened as an outsider looking in from an insider looking out. I've been following the campaign from beginning to end. I love US politics. It is extremely interesting and fascinating and entertaining all at once. And so we're going to go into it, and I'm going to bring in all different types of points and views all throughout. So we have Biden. We're going to start off with Biden. So Biden had a kind of like a mini primary last year, and he kind of ran just in several states to see how people would really like him. Now, for the most part, Americans do not like Biden. Like, he's not a popular figurehead. Most people do not like Biden. I think the numbers are like 70% does not like Biden, did not like his presidency. So we ran against Bernie Sanders in like a mini primary, and Bernie Sanders definitely wiped Biden. And so you have that. So what people don't understand is that Biden came in 2020 in the height of COVID, but a lot of the laws that were prevalent during Biden's years were a lot of Trump laws, like the Trump tax policy. People keep saying, oh my God, I'll get money under Trump, da, da, da. Not necessarily so. We're under Trump's tax policy that will expire in 2025. And when Kamala ran for president the last 3 to 4 months, she even said that she will allow that to expire before to enacting a different plan. So a lot of the benefits that people are reaping the rewards of is kind of from the Democrats. And what people really don't understand that. And we're going to all of the factors that kind of led to the Democratic demise. That was quite a shocking blow. And the reason why I keep saying it is a shocking blow, because we have a president that has done all of these horrible things, like ran one of the most racist campaigns. He was charged 30 counts. He led an insurrection. Like all of these, he is not the ideal model of how, or ideal candidate for presidency of our country, right? Because we think that when we look at a person who's running for president, he has to be a model citizen, no wrong. He's done all of this good. He's an elite. Usually candidates, U.S. presidential candidates are usually elite. They have a liberal elite education, graduated from Harvard, got Columbia Law School at the end of it, and did some private practice or worked for government, and then was a head of community organizing in his or her there's community. So things like that have gotten Warren awards, and there's no really blame or blemish or wrongdoing in any of their path. They make sure that their path is squeaky clean, because a lot of people do have political ambitions, right? They aim for higher office. So a lot of people do tend to make sure that they don't end up doing wrongdoing. And then Trump comes along, right? Trump says all of these things, racist things, and, talks about Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, talks about horrible things about migrants and Latinas and all of these things, and said that people who come from Africa are coming from shithole countries. So it goes against the opposite of what we're usually used to. But a lot of people who honestly should be like, that's horrible, that's wrong, right? As a person in society who's heading the highest form of office, you shouldn't be saying such a thing. That is wrong, because you're setting an example for younger people who are looking up to you, and you're representing the country also not only for the people, but also for the world, right? People are looking at what he's saying, and he's like, oh my God, he's so authentic, he's so real, he says what's on his mind. Just because he's saying what's on his mind doesn't mean what is on his mind is correct or real or right. So people love the fact that he says things that are not politically coded, that is not wonky coded, and he say things in plain language. And so that is the reason why people are devastated, because why in the world would you elect such a man in high office who has done all these things and is setting a bad example for younger people? So you have that going on, because, and also the Democrats will usually say that he represents the erosion and the degradation of the liberal democracy and our institutions, because Trump wants to centralize his power, and he really wants to do things that really is the executive, legislature, and the Supreme Court's job. And so that is removing the guardrails of the presidency, and that's very dangerous historically. So we're seeing all of this, but people on the ground who are normal, like everyday voters, don't really understand that. And that goes to my first reason as to why people, at least in Canada anyway, and a lot of people from all over the world, are not really shocked as to why he got elected. When Kamala was going around through her campaign, and I'll go back to the beginning when I talked about like Bernie and Biden, Kamala wasn't saying words that were plain language. She was saying things that were very political, coded, that if you weren't an educated person who has been watching her interviews and watching how she answers things and watch her speech, then you wouldn't really understand what she's saying. Which is shocking to me too, because I'm watching this and I'm following her and I get it. However, a lot of people don't. When she first announced that she would be representing Biden in the election, people were quite happy, quite enthusiastic. Her base was supercharged. And the reason why her base was supercharged was because, honestly, and I'm going to speak for everybody else, number one, she wasn't Biden. And number two, we thought she would be different from the rest. She would bring a different perspective to what's been going on. You're probably like, oh, to be more liberal, to be more left, to be more extreme left, whatever that may be, we thought she would be different. Now, yes, my take is I thought she would be running as the liberal, authentically liberal candidate as she is, because technically she ends up warping into somebody else in the middle and end of the campaign, rather, and I'll talk about that. So, for instance, going back to plain language, because we thought she would be running liberal, and it all makes sense. Like, we thought that she would be different. Not running liberal. We thought that she'd be quite different. Different from what we're seeing, different from what we're used to. We thought this would be another Joe Biden. Another Obama. In the sense that, not Obama-style campaign, but in the fact that we have somebody who is authentically themselves and who is not afraid to be authentically themselves when they need to be. So, for instance, and we saw glimpses of it on social media, because I'm always on social media chronically, online, and I'm seeing like videos of her talking about how she would like make a turkey, talking about how she would cook, like, oh, I'll make a turkey like this. She'd be dancing and laughing, and we don't usually see a person end up being themselves, like showing parts of their personality. Like, U.S. presidential candidates usually don't show us themselves. Like, I know Joe Biden will show him who he truly is, like here and there. He could be brazen and brass and and tough. Obama, like everybody used to say about him, like he is so smart, but he's so cool. Like you can get a beer with him and chit chat and shoot the stuff. You know what I mean? Kamala seems like people call her Mamala because she feels like a warm blanket, like a person that you can talk to about anything. And that's what it felt like in the beginning of the campaign. But she started to not really speak that way when it comes to her policies. And of course, we never really got a lot of her policies when it came to her speeches. We got her policies when they decided to show us her policies, but it wasn't quite evident what those policies were. A lot of people were relying on what she voted for, what she passed, who she was in the past, and people thought she would be more liberal. That ended up not being the case, which we'll talk about next. So let me give you an example of not speaking in plain language. She talks about when it comes to the economy, all I keep hearing, and I can go to her plan, but all I keep hearing when I'm seeing her do interviews and seeing her do this, she would say that she would build more houses. I'm like, okay, but it's great that you build more houses, but we millennials and older Gen Zs want to be able to afford the house that are currently alive. So what are you doing for that? And of course, I can look it up on their policy, what those policies actually are. But in interviews, what people are actually, because not a lot of people take the time to read her policies, but in interviews, in debates, in her rallies, for the most part, in her rallies, she's saying that. And I'm like, what does building more house have to do with me as a person who can't even afford a house? That's number one. And then she talks about how I'm going to give new business owner a $50,000 loan. That's great. But business owners are the minority of this country. The vast majority of your base and of this country are working class people who work 9 to 5, 9 to 8, 9 to 9 every single day. So not everybody wants to own a business. Not everybody wants to risk it all, because it does require risk to do that, and you do need to build capital to gain capital. So not everybody wants to have a business one day. So to say to everybody, to us, in interviews, on podcasts, in the debate stage, in rallies, that's what you want to do. We're like, but the vast majority of people are working class people. Like, how does that affect me? And as a Canadian, we're seeing that. That's what I'm seeing, right? That is what I'm seeing. So, plain language, she wasn't really be able to, and maybe there is a way to connect that to us millennials who are having trouble buying homes, to us older Gen Alphas who can't even get a job. Like, I would expect her for her talking about getting a job, and I'll talk about that too, the unemployment rate, inflation, getting a job, how it would make it easier for me. And I needed to verbally say that. She wasn't verbally saying that. She kept saying about small businesses, and I'm like, not everybody wants to create a small business. I don't understand. So there's that. Plain language, she wasn't really just like, I needed her to talk to me as if she's talking to her I don't think she has kids. I think she has stepchildren. Talking to her stepchildren, her stepdaughter, stepson. Tell me, how am I going to gain wealth? How am I going to get a job? Like, how am I going to build capital to own a house? Like, that is what we needed from her. She wasn't able to do that. Number two, going on to her being more liberal, it would have been more authentically herself if she kept with the policies and the person that she was in the earlier stage of her political journey. If you were to go back to her political journey, she was quite liberal. She was not for the death penalty when it comes to people who are convicted and ordered to death. She wasn't for that. So things like that. I mean, she ended up changing. Not only was she changing, like, she wasn't being who authentically she is, which is like a quite liberal person if you were to add it all up, right? But she moved more center right. And I'm like, Why? Why? What was that? Like, why did you do that? Because we're Democrats, and in the last 15 years, and we're meaning like, yes, my family is historically have voted blue. I'm Canadian, okay? I can't vote. So why did you do that? Why was it so important for you to tell us that you owned guns? Why, as a Democrat, are you saying to us that you need to build a wall at the border? We don't say that. Democrats don't say that. What we say is we will put in measures to make sure that people who are able to come in here can come in here and be able to build a life for themselves. We would protect the ones who have merit asylums. We are not for separating families at the border. Like, that's what we say. The Democratic Party is for come all, like come one, come all, right? That is our base. To open your mouth and say that we're going to be building a wall too, and you have guns, and you're going to be doing campaign with Liz Cheney, it made no sense. Like her campaign was morphing into something, as you can tell, that had heavy interest from the Joe Biden campaign. Not even Obama campaign, the Joe Biden campaign. Because the Obama campaign it didn't smell like in the beginning, it smelled like the Obama campaign staffers. But it feels like Joe Biden and then DNC messed it up. And we'll talk about Joe Biden. That's where I didn't understand as to why she was moving more center, where her base, I feel like her base is more left. And I do think the 15 million people who decided not to vote were people who were inspired and enthusiastic in the beginning, but decided not to vote. Did not resonate with either of parties because didn't like Trump, but looked at Kamala and was like, I know about it. Who didn't think that they would get anything from this presidency campaign or any of these people if they voted either. So the 15 million people who usually vote and decided not to vote in 2024, but they voted in 2020, that's another reason why. That's another reason why the world was also not surprised as to what's going on here. She said let's talk about Joe Biden. Another third reason. She said she would be more different than Joe. She said that in the beginning. She did say, but she wasn't definitive with it. And she would say one thing in one interview, and then another interview, she would say, I love Joe. I wouldn't change anything. But in another interview, it's like, listen, I'm a whole new person. What I'm going to do, I'm going to build on Joe's success. But she didn't really outline to us, number one, how you're different than Joe. Why is Joe different? What you're going to do. And again, when she would explain what she's going to do, it didn't really had to do with any of the working people. Like, what people don't understand, the vast majority of America is living around the poverty line, right? Not a lot of people make six figures, right? So you have working class people and people who are suffering. Like, the inflation is high. However, inflation is good, which I'll talk about. Inflation, but cost gouging by corporations and businesses have been as high as ever because of COVID, which I'm going to talk about now. So we're seeing people suffer under the Biden administration, but we're seeing this new person, which we thought should be new and exciting and different, ended up being kind of saying to us that you're going to be the same old. So we don't want that. And then on top of that, not only are you going to be same old, you're going to be more Republican now? Like, what is that about? So people are suffering in COVID. Like, okay, Biden took on the COVID years, right? You have, like, he came in at 2021, right? Like 2020. Sorry, guys, I'm a bit tired today. Anyway, he came in. And what people don't understand is that it's good to have a little bit of inflation, right? If there's no inflation between 2 to 3% of a growing economy, then your economy is not growing. It's going in the opposite to grow, and it's decreasing. It's deflating. Your economy is not growing. So it's actually healthy for a growing national economy to have a little bit of inflation. With that being said, with that being said, it's because of the cost gouging, and of course the wages are not meeting up to that. A lot of corporations right now are under pandemic prices. And because there's lack of regulation when it comes to what corporations can do and the cost of goods, they're charging whatever they want to charge. And there is no consequences to that. And that's why people are seeing $5 for milk and $7 for eggs. Because even though technically our economy is kind of at 2.5% inflation, the cost for goods is so ridiculously high that because our wages haven't gone up, we can't really afford for the goods, or it doesn't even feel like inflation is low, because I know that Joe Biden and his administration is saying that inflation is low, but people do not get it because they have to deal with the day-to-day of their lives, which is the $7 eggs, the $5 milk. So Biden's Kamala Harris's proposal on cost gouging has been a really good job. They did a really good job. I've read the plan. It's very good at aggressively attacking how they're going to work with corporations to reduce cost gouging by including regulation and things like that. So there is that. So people really didn't feel like under Joe Biden, like they're experiencing this prosperous economy, and that's what Joe Biden keeps saying, like over and over and over again, this is the greatest economy. Like when he says that in speeches, I don't know what he's talking about. Like, are you talking about but compared to our economy to other countries? Because yes, our economy, subjectively, the U.S. economy is bigger than a lot of countries. Is it better? There are a couple of countries that could compete. But the Americans who are dealing with the $7 eggs and $5 milk do not really feel that. So you have that. And so there are a lot of things that Biden has done in the administration. I found an article, and I just want to read some. And I'm pretty sure a lot of Americans do not know any of this. And that goes to my other point, which is the communication between the Dominicans. No, the communication between the Democratic Party and its own people. They're not really good at really communicating what they've done to the people in a way that people can understand, like in a digestible manner. I don't know, because now podcasts are the way to go for politicians now. Maybe they should go to a podcaster and relay some of the good they've done each quarter and say, hey, these are things that they've done, because they're not really good at explaining that. And if you're any other person who's dealing with the $7 eggs and the $5 milk, they don't really, the people and any other person that wouldn't, and people have their own issues and troubles. They don't have time to really understand the policies unless you're a highly educated elite person who's used to dealing with and reading these type of policies, and you can be able to interpret them yourself. So Joe Biden expanded overtime guarantees for millions. So this was presented through the Barack Obama presidency in his second term. So oversight regulation that called for workers making up to $47,476 to automatically be entitled to time and a half. That's incredible. First over-the-counter birth control pill to hit U.S. stores in 2024. However, there's been concern from the FDA about it because people may not understand the risks and the use of it. But first over-the-counter pill Okay? You don't have to go to the pharmacist and be like, hey, how you doing? Gun violence prevention and gun safety to get a boost. Biden established the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and in 2023, schools were awarded $286 million in federal dollars to support student wellness and school mental health professionals. Did you know that? Renewable power is the number 2 source of electricity in the U.S. and climbing. Biden administration agencies and officials have made the transition to green energy a central tenet, reinvigorating programs left dormant under Trump and accelerating approval of renewable energy projects like offshore wind. And Democratic lawmakers passed landmark legislation to reduce greenhouse gases that are driving climate change and provide support for greenhouse power sources. Preventing discriminatory mortgage lending. Federal Reserve and its fellow independent bank regulators drafted a new anti-redlining framework, which will go into effect starting in 2026. It requires banks to lend to lower income communities in areas where they have a concentration of mortgage and small business loans, rather than just where they have physical branches. See that? A sweeping crackdown on junk fees and overdraft charges. CFPB in January released a long-awaited proposal to cut the fees that large banks and credit unions can charge consumers for overdrawing their accounts. So the CFPB proposed several options for the benchmark fee, ranging from $3 to $14. The agency is also expected to finalize the proposal, cutting credit card late fees to $8. You guys know about this? Forcing Chinese companies to open their books. Preventing another January 6th insurrection. The bipartisan group in Congress works to reform the Electoral Count Act. There's so many things that they did. The changes include making clear that the vice president's role is solely ministerial, requiring that electors in states are picked in accordance with the laws of the state enacted prior to election day, and raising the threshold for how many members of Congress are needed to object to a state's slate. Okay? Building armies of drones to counter China. The nation's farms get big bucks to go climate smart. Biden scraps Trump's paint scheme for Air Force One. Trump wanted to change the color of planes to blue, white, and red. Yeah. The Biden administration helps broker a deal to save the Colorado River, giving smaller food producers a boost. Biden recommends loosening federal restrictions on marijuana, which honestly should just be, I don't know why there are restrictions on it. A penalty for college programs that trap students in debt. Like, all of these things, the normal person does not know. So when they know about these things, I think people will be shocked as to what their government is actually doing. But that goes into my communication point. The DNC and the Democratic Party doesn't do a good job of really communicating with their voter base about the things that they've done. They just keep saying, we've done great things, but we don't know what the great things talking about. That's how Biden said in his speech after the U.S. election results were showcased. He said, "We live in the greatest economy in the world." Like, people are not feeling that, and that goes to the issues and the things that the normal working class person is dealing with, right? Like the $5 milk and $7 eggs. People are having trouble getting jobs, even though there are hundreds of thousands of jobs being gained each month. People are having trouble, like, having a house, like, all of these things. And then I know you can tell there's been some infighting with the DNC and the Democratic Joe Biden campaign, with Kamala's campaign, with Obama's campaign. Honestly, in my opinion, Joe Biden should have withdrawn when he should have had the chance to. And he didn't. He didn't. And he thought that he would continue with the second term. It would make sense if he continued with second term if people wanted you there. Majority of people thought Joe Biden was too old to become president, so he should have dropped as when it became available to him. So we couldn't do a proper primary. We couldn't, choose the next person who would represent him. Kamala would have been one of them, but it could have been few other people across America. So there are things like this that are happening where it created Kamala. It put Kamala's campaign in a very sticky situation where I think Kamala's campaign was a combination of Joe Biden's campaign and Obama's campaign, which really that's like a 2012 campaign strategy. It doesn't work. We're in a whole different electoral base in 2024. And also too, I also do think as well, like, the DNC and the Democratic Party doesn't really know what's happening on the ground. I do think that they're kind of oblivious to what the people on the ground are dealing with. And so when all three of these people, when all three of these like different types of campaign fractions in the party are trying to get a say on Kamala and how she should run, you can tell it's been quite disjointed. I also do think too, I don't know why they thought the campaign was in the bag. I remember Kamala saying when she got the nomination that she was going to earn her nomination. Like, that was what I remembered in the beginning. I was like, yes, girl. Yes, earn your nomination. I thought that's what she was going to do. But it does feel like Kamala's campaign thought she had it in the bag. And there wasn't a lot of conversations with people from her own voter base. Instead, she was trying to appeal to Republicans. There was a lot of appealing to Republicans. There was a lot of making Republicans happy. I have a gun, build a wall, Liz Cheney. I don't understand that. I don't get it. It's quite clear the Democratic Party and Kamala's campaign was out of touch with voters. And there's so much they did wrong. And that's kind of like the bulk of it. But it's good to say as well that Kamala really did have 3 months. However, if Joe Biden dropped out, we'd have had more months. But Kamala really did have 3 months. In which, in my honest opinion, if she did run more liberal, and if she did really listen and speak to the different fractions and different groups in the Democratic Party, and really try to appeal their vote rather than appealing the Republican, I really do think Kamala would have won, because Donald Trump won the popular vote by 4 million people. But he lost. The Democratic Party lost the Electoral College. But honestly, about half of the U.S. is split. Half of the U.S. are Democrats, and half the U.S., the voter base, the people who voted were Republicans. So Trump did win the popular vote, but only by 4 million people. So in some margin, that's quite a lot. I do think, yes, it would have been better if she had more time, but I do think if she really listened to the people in her own party, I think she should have won. And she's an amazing person, an amazing, strong person to run one hell of a campaign. But if she really just listened to her voter base, I think she would have went quite far. A lot of people are saying that race has to do with it. I do think that it has a play. I do think people did not want to see a black person, a black woman, or woman in politics. It is coming. Women politicians, there are going to be a lot of women presidential candidates coming up. Gretchen from Michigan is applying. I think AOC will become president one day. A lot of black women from down south who have some leaders. I know the things like, there's a lot of women are going to run again. It's not going to really defeat this, but it'll only power the base. People are defeated now, but I think people just need to have time to breathe. I do not agree with what's happening on social media on attacking Latinos. Latinos and white men and women carry Trump to victory. Black men and women, which we do all the time, carried Kamala to victory. And I think it's really weird and rude to, be like, oh, we're not going to support other issues because you didn't vote with us. I think everybody was really voting with their conscience and voting for their self-interest, but also voting because they really don't know what's going on. And they're really being fed they're only relying on what's being fed to them, which in my opinion has not been a lot. So I don't blame them. But it is up to us to really, have ourselves make ourselves informed for a very important decision like that, which is voting the next president into power. And so I think that's all I really want to say. I do think, though, it's such a dangerous precedent, like I said in the beginning, for a man with all of these things that has happened to become the president of the most powerful nation in the world. It does set a precedent to people that you can truly be whoever, do whatever, based on morals and character and things like that. I do think still be a good person, go and organize, be in your community, be the best version of yourself each and every day, and run for president. Do not do what Trump did. I think Trump was very lucky. People are saying that if Nikki Haley ran, she would have got more votes than Trump. I don't think so, because I think people are quite misogynistic and sexist. So I don't think people would have voted a woman into power. But I do think people are ready for a Kamala if she ended up being more different, like not an outsider, but a bit more different and new and exciting than Joe Biden, different from Trump. So I do think Trump was quite lucky, not because he ran an amazing campaign. No, it's because people were ready for something different. So that's my thoughts on the U.S. election. It has, to me, my opinion, it has been quite devastating, only because of what is at stake, which is democracy and protecting those guardrails, which I don't think Trump is for. And so I really think it's really important to protect that. And we'll see the next 4 years. I do think Democrats are going to have a larger conversation and really talk to and garner the trust of their voter base again and speak to them again where people can understand and have that conversation, but also excite them. And there will be another election in 2 years, the midterms. And so there will be another 4 years. So this is a good time for the DNC to really figure out what they did, because they're really out of touch. And a lot of Democrats, not even Democrats anymore, they're independents. So yeah, let me know what you guys think down below about your thoughts about the U.S. election, where you guys lie. I think it's going to be a very interesting 4 years. I do think we should stop finger blaming and list down all the things what the Democratic Party did wrong and do better at it and fix them and eradicate it and do better at it. Garner trust with your base. Earn your trust. Earn that. I think the Democratic Party just didn't value their base, and people just thought that, oh, if you're a Democrat, you're a Democrat forever. No, we're not. So let me know what you guys think down below. Don't forget to follow, like, comment. This is a very long conversation. If you want to know the article where I read all of Biden's achievements or changes, it's a political article. They listed 30 things that Joe Biden did as president you might have missed. That is the article for anybody who's wondering. And stay woke, stay healthy, stay safe, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.